What if Robb Stark anticipated the Red Wedding? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. As the Stark army approaches the twins, King Robb glances up at the castle and steels himself for what will come. He does not expect this meeting to be pleasant, not where old Walder's pride is concerned. But there is no way around it. They need the Freys if they're going to continue the war. He is about to order them to march, and one of his scouts reports a rider approaching, bearing the Frey banner. While they were expecting an escort, they were still leagues away, but the scouts identify the rider as Robb's former squire, Oliver Frey, so Robb allows him to pass. When the boy is brought to them, they're surprised to see him dirty and wearing well-worn clothes. But Oliver explains that he did not come from the twins. Instead, they tried to send him away and bore an urgent message.
Your Grace, I don't think Lord Walder intends to forgive you. There's been talk of bloodshed. I do not know the details, but our men-at-arms look like they're preparing for war instead of battle. Meanwhile, Black Walder and Lame Lothar have been meeting with my grandfather. Nothing good can come of that. They've also sent the Freys away. Sir Perwyn, and those who rode alongside your battle guard.
This is troubling news. When we reunite with Lord Bolton, I shall...
Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but I fear Lord Bolton may be a part of it. He recently agreed to marry one of my kin. It could be nothing, but the timing is suspect.
Robb's face hardens. The Freys are some of his most powerful Riverlands vassals, and his key to getting back to the north. He cannot afford to ignore them, but this sounds more like a trap. He thanks Oliver for this information and gathers his lords and advisors. When they arrive at the twins, the first thing Robb does is order Roose Bolton to guide the fords of the Trident to ensure the Lannisters do not bother them. Although the Lord of Dreadfort protests and says he's already placed men to guard it, Robb insists that a second lord must be in command and recalls the men from other houses, leaving only soldiers from House Bolton on the fords. These men he recalled are placed just outside the camp as a reserve force. Next, he has the leaderless Karstark men placed under the command of Great John Umber, with orders to keep an eye on them. Those remaining Dreadfort men are placed under the watchful eye of Dacy Mormont. Lastly, the River Lords are ordered to keep a watchful eye on the camps. With these preparations, the Northern Rivermen gather to meet the Freys. As they gather within the castle, Robb's men remain on high alert, camped in formation and keeping their weapons close by while dressing in full armor under their clothes. Robb and his men remain vigilant. His lords remain sober and clustered together so they can support each other. Robb himself watches Walder Frey's every movement, noting the veiled glances the old man exchanges with his sons and daughters. Just as the reins of Castamere begin to play, Robb nods at Small John Umber, who hurls a flagon at Walder Frey's guards and wrestles the nearest men-at-arms to the ground. Robb snatches a sword from the fallen guard and rushes over to Walder Frey's table, just as the North and Rivermen rush to their feet, charging at the Frey captors. The hall erupts into chaos. Northern soldiers storm forward, cutting down Frey men who now find themselves in surprise. Outside, Dacy Mormont and Greatjohn led a small but swift charge to rally the men in the camps, turning the slaughter into a proper battle. This battle comes to a swift end as orders come from inside as the Freys are ordered to lay down their weapons by Lord Walder, who feels Robb's sword pressing against his throat.
If you value your life, late Walder Frey, I suggest you order your men to stand down.
I just did.
All of them.
Taking a deep breath, Walder and Lame Lothar signal the archers above to drop their crossbows, all but confirming his treachery. The king's men waste no time in disarming the Freys. Soon the twins are now firmly under northern control. Next, Robb orders his men to surround and arrest Roose Bolton. Amidst the confusion, the Dreadfort men are in no position to resist and are quickly suppressed with Roose Bolton taken back in chains. Yet their next discovery is even more shocking. Robb's sister Arya Stark was among the camp, escorted by the Hound. With no word from her since the start of the war, they assumed the worst, but her arrival overjoys Robb and Catelyn, who take it as a good omen from the gods. As they finish securing the camp, though, some of the Freys are quick to jump at the opportunity to save themselves and confess the plan, including Raymond Frey, Walder's grandson and heir. He produces the letter sent by Tywin, privately giving assurances of this plan and promising to make the Freys lords of Riverrun if they betray the Starks. This information is enough for heads to begin rolling. Lord Walder, Walder Rivers, Lame Lothar, Black Walder, and other ringleaders are executed. Meanwhile, the rest of the Freys are arrested, or, like Sir Raymond, sent to the wall. Unfortunately, Roose Bolton was smart enough to destroy his correspondence, leaving them with no evidence aside from rumors and testimonies from the Freys. But Robb still insists on confronting him. Roose is dragged into the Great Hall of the Twins. The banners of House Frey are now smoking in a nearby hearth. Robb Stark stands at the head of the room, his sword resting against the stone table as Roose Bolton is escorted in under heavy guard. The Lord of the Dreadfort moves with calm indifference.
You've been busy, Your Grace. The Freys won't recover from this, I imagine. Neither will you.
If he intended to intimidate Roose, he failed, as the Lord of the Dreadfort doesn't flinch, offering a crooked smile.
You've come to pass judgment, then. Have you found proof of my supposed treachery? There's enough blood on your hands to drown the Dreadfort. You knew about the Freys' plot. You married one of their daughters to secure your place in it. But you were clever enough to burn the evidence, weren't you? You flatter me, Your Grace. If you've no proof, what's stopping you from running me through here and now? My guards are gone. My banner's fallen. What's the delay? You don't deserve the mercy of a trial. If I were less of a man, I'd see your head mounted beside Walder Frey's. But I am not Walder Frey. Perhaps you would benefit from taking a bit from him. Truth be told, I'm rather disappointed. He might have been an old fool, but he understood that amidst the chaos, evidence could be found. Or created.
You insult my son. You insult your king with such an idea. Lord Bolton, you forget that your life is in his hands.
I forget nothing, my lady. I am simply telling the king what he ought to have learned by now. Your honor is the noose around your neck. You wouldn't be here if not for your obsession with it. Tell me, was it honorable to break faith with the Freys? To wed your queen while spitting on the vows you made to Walder? Honor didn't save your father. Honor didn't save Winterfell from Theon Greyjoy or win back the Karstarks. And now it's left you vulnerable, ruling over a fractured kingdom with lions at your door. I don't doubt myself. I doubt you. I doubt whether sparing your life is worth the risk. Then kill me. Prove to me and your kingdom you're more than just a boy who inherited his father's mistakes.
Robb lifts his sword, and for a moment, the hall holds its breath. But then he stops. His blade hovers in the air before he lowers it slowly.
But tell me this, Your Grace. Do you truly understand the opportunity you've been handed? You've survived something no one thought you could. Do you not see the chaos you could unleash in the Lannisters' domains? I've already ordered copies of Tywin's letter to be made. They're being sent to every lord and lady in the Seven Kingdoms. The truth will reach them soon enough. Letters? Letters are words on parchment, easily dismissed or spun into lies by cleverer tongues. But tales, Your Grace, tales linger. Tales ignite. They are worshipped in inns, sung by minstrels, and shouted by fools in markets. A letter tells one story. A song tells 100. Songs? Do you think songs are what will win this war? This war has changed, and the time for swords has passed. Now it is the game of mind and hidden daggers. Send them out. Spread the tale of Walder Frey's treachery and Tywin Lannister's cowardice. Let the small folk mutter about the betrayal at the Twins. Let lords hear it in every feast hall. Let it fester.
Robb studies him in silence, his mind working through the implications. He hates the idea of such underhanded tactics, but he cannot deny the value in it.
You aren't given this advice freely. Spare me execution, and allow me to take the black. You'll rid yourself of me, and I'll be far from your lands which you can give to whatever toady you wish. You'll take the black, but if I ever hear you have set foot south of the wall, there won't be another chance. Do you understand me?
As the guards take him away, Robb's thoughts linger on Bolton's words. Robb and his Northmen focus on retaking Moat Cailin, while the River Lords are sent out to begin this propaganda wall. Many of them are too eager to turn against the Freys, telling how their sons and brothers were nearly massacred while under the banner of peace. They talk of Robb's cunning in outsmarting them, and their bravery in overpowering them. But most of all, they talk about the treachery of the Freys and the cowardice of Lord Tywin. Amidst this mockery, there is also disgust and hatred. Guest right is one of the most sacred laws in the Seven Kingdoms, and Tywin was prepared to throw it aside. Singers begin to sing about the liar lion, who hid in his den and employed weasels to hunt for him, while fools jape about wolves sending lions running back with their tails between their legs. Word soon reaches King's Landing and beyond. While no one dares question this in the Lannisters' presence, the Tyrells are far from certain. Their alliance is still young and has not been fully realized. In particular, Olenna Tyrell begins to question the value of working with the Lannisters. This is only made worse by a pair of further humiliations. The first is the death of King Joffrey, which throws the capital into chaos. Not only is this the loss of their king, but the rumors of Sansa Stark and Tyrion Lannister being responsible add to the shame. Many see it as divine justice for what Tywin intended to do, and others take it as proof that the Lannisters are not nearly as strong as they believe. The other is the arrival of Jaime Lannister, maimed and helpless. What should have been a great victory now turned bitter, as their greatest warrior cannot even fight. Olenna Tyrell begins to reach out with proposals. Now that Sansa has fled the capital and Tyrion is facing trials, the Lannister plan to try and inherit Winterfell has failed, but the Tyrells now want their shot. She offers to marry her grandson, Willis Tyrell, with Arya Stark, as she is now technically Robb's heir. In exchange, the Tyrells will do their part to ensure the Lannisters can't march out to war immediately and give Robb a chance to secure his kingdom. Robb hesitates. He has just gotten Arya back, and the last thing he wants is to send her off again. But an alliance with the Tyrells can change everything. Arya and Catelyn are even more shocked and dismayed, but Arya reluctantly agrees. With that signed, suddenly the Tyrells find several reasons why they cannot march against the Riverlands. They must deal with rebellious vassals and secure the Rose Road. There are risks of an Ironborn attack. All these excuses and more flood the small council, preventing the Tyrells from acting. This frustrates Tywin, who makes plan to march out with just the Westermen. But before these plans can come to fruition, Tywin is murdered by Tyrion. With the Lannisters in chaos, Robb strikes at Moat Cailin. Weakened with Victarion leaving, the garrison is helpless as the Northmen attack from the south and north, while the Crannogmen harass the garrison. This allowed the Northern Army to advance back into their territory, and the fresh influx of troops put the Ironborn on the back foot, with Torrhen Square and their other holdings quickly falling. Yara Greyjoy, meanwhile, abandons Deepwood Motte, leaving the North fully in control of their territory. But there remains two sticking points. The first of these is Ramsay Snow, the bastard of Dreadfort. With the loss of Roose Bolton's station, Ramsay wisely chooses to flee into the mountains with his most loyal supporters. They are joined by renegade Northmen, Ironborn remnants, and begin causing a rampage across the rural areas of the north. The other is Mance Rayder, who is attacking the Wall and is on the verge of overwhelming the Night's Watch. They've sent messages all across the north, imploring for aid, and while most houses were not in a position to help, Robb sees this as his sworn duty to aid them. He gathers 3,000 of his most trusted veterans and marches to the Wall to reinforce the Night's Watch. Among them is Roose Bolton, who will be left to serve out his sentence, while leaving the rest to deal with the Ironborn. The Wall rises against the pale sky, its icy expanse glittering in the weak northern sun. Robb Stark and his 3,000 veterans stare up at the Wall, preparing themselves for battle, as the banners of House Stark flutter proudly in the wind. As they crest a hill near Castle Black, they prepare themselves for the worst. The recent reports did not look good, as the Night's Watch headquarters was on the verge of falling with only a tiny garrison. The sight of the northern reinforcements is a relief to the Night's Watch. Even with a relatively small force, it immediately turns the tide. For the next few days, the cavalry launches sorties out against the wildlings, who have no counter against the heavy horses and break. Entire clans are surrounded or captured, while hundreds are taken prisoner. Meanwhile, the infantry reinforce the Wall, manning defenses and raining arrows down. This makes it harder for climbers to try and flank. Seeing how the full might of the North is backing them, Mance is forced to negotiate. He offers to surrender and lay down their weapons if they are allowed to settle in the gift. While Robb is initially reluctant, Jon vouches for them and suggests having the Night's Watch monitor them to ensure that things go smoothly.
Let the wildlings cross, but keep a close watch on them. Winter is coming for all of us, and we'll need every sword to face it.
In the coming weeks, wildlings begin to stream through the wall, dozens at first, but then hundreds. They begin to garrison additional castles with these volunteers. Among them are Tormund Giantsbane, Val the Wildling Princess, and many other notable leaders. But others refuse this offer, such as the Weeper and Rattleshirt, who opt to remain in captivity. But with these new castles being garrisoned, Jon Snow cannot keep track of them. This allows Roose Bolton to reach for power. First, he contacts his son and orders him to raid the gift to distract the Night's Watch and the wildling settlers, and then he secretly contacts Rattleshirt and frees him. Together with the exiled Freys, the group plots to rebuild their forces. They send Rattleshirt beyond the wall to the holdouts, offering to let them pillage to their heart's content if they help Roose Bolton. Soon, thousands of wildlings rush to join them, led by the Weeper. Once they are prepared to cross the wall, Roose sends word for Ramsay to attack Molestown, pulling away wildlings and men from the Night's Watch who try to beat them back. This gives Roose an opportunity. He and his mutineers gather to take control of Greyguard, wiping out the small garrison and opening the gates to let their new army through. They rush through the gift, burning and pillaging everything in their way. Jon is the first to hear of this, and he gathers the Night Watch and tries to beat them back. But his ramshackle force is no match for Roose, as he's gathered nearly 10,000 wildlings along with renegade Ironborn, bandits, and Dreadfort soldiers. This army burns through the area around Greyguard and the gift, where they try to raise reinforcements from the wildlings there. But to their surprise, Tormund and most of the other leaders remain loyal. Seeing this, Roose hurries south to gather more allies. They find these allies in the form of Arnulf Karstark, who offers them shelter in Karhold. As their army gathers there, Robb gets word of this attack and marches out to face them. By the time they reach Karhold, Roose and his army have set themselves in front of the walls, a hodgepodge of wildlings, Ironborn, rebels, and Night Watch deserters. One banner stands taller than the rest, the Flayed Man of Bolton. Robb turns to his commanders, including Jon Snow, who left his position in the Night's Watch. Around them, the Stark Bannermen, Galbert Glover, Waymon Manderly, Greatjon Unber, and Mage Mormont await their king's orders, their forces bolstered by wildling conscripts who chose to remain loyal.
Every day they remain, they burn more of the north. We end this now. He's gathered the desperate and disloyal. Their unity is brittle. Break their spirit, and they'll scatter.
At dawn, the battle begins. Robb orders his cavalry to sweep wide, aiming to encircle the enemy camp. Galbert Glover leads the charge, his riders crashing into the wildling flanks with a thunderous roar. The wildlings fight fiercely against the heavy horses of the north, but they lack the discipline to hold and begin to be pushed back. From the center, Robb's main host advances, shields locked and spears bristling like a porcupine's quills. Between their ranks, Jon's wildlings fight alongside them, a mix of axes, spears, and crude weapons crashing into Roose's renegades. Even a few giants rush forward atop mammoths, sweeping men aside. The center is made up of Ironborn renegade Northmen and the Night's Watch deserters. They are far more disciplined and better armed. Their shield wall holds them from the attack, thanks to Cregan Karstark rallying them. From the top of a small hill, Roose Bolton watches everything and relays instructions. Suddenly, the left flank, made up of Ramsay's bandits, rushed against Tormund's right. Although not the heavy cavalry of the northern horses, his horses are enough to terrorize the wildlings and open up gaps for them to ride through. These light cavalry rush through and hit the northern from the rear, taking the pressure off the Karstark's beleaguered forces. But as they are starting to make progress, he comes face to face with Jon Snow, who rallies a group of retainers from the center and forms a defensive line in the rear. Lacking the armor to break through a prepared form, Ramsay's forces begin to get bogged down. Things only get worse when a squadron from the right suddenly rushes forward, led by Tormund Giantsbane. Without their maneuverability, these cavalrymen are cut down amidst the wildlings' laughter.
Come on, you bastards! Do you want the north? Here's the bloody north!
The sight of their former comrades turning against them breaks the spirit of many of Roos's wildlings. They begin to scatter, retreating towards the tree line. Meanwhile, the Ironborn begin to pull back too, as they decide this endeavor is no longer worth their effort. Ramsay charges forward recklessly, screaming curses at his fleeing men. He drives his horse toward Jon Snow, and their paths converge. Ramsay swings his sword wildly, striking as if Jon were a piece of meat. These clumsy attacks are easily blocked by Jon Snow.
"You're nothing but a bastard."
But Jon's response takes the words from Ramsay as he suddenly falls over as Jon slays his horse from under him. As Ramsay gets to his feet, Jon Snow comes at him, their swords clashing in a flurry of sparks that light up the ground around them. Yet the flow of battle begins to shift as Longclaw cuts through Ramsay's defenses, sending him tumbling from his horse. The bastard of Bolton falls to the blood-soaked snow, his face twisted in rage and disbelief. On the hill, Roose Bolton watches the collapse of his forces. His horse shifts nervously beneath him as the Stark banner draws closer.
"It seems the day is lost."
Moments later, Stark riders crest the hill. At their head is Robb Stark, his sword raised high.
"Roose Bolton, you are done. Surrender, and your men may yet live."
Roose looks down at Robb, his face unreadable. Slowly he dismounts, dropping his sword to the ground.
You have your victory, Your Grace.
By nightfall, the battlefield is quiet. Ramsay's body is strung up on a tree as a warning to all who would follow his path. Beside him is Arnoff Karstark, the Weeper, and Rattleshirt. Roose is brought before Robb in chains, his face as composed as ever.
Your crimes have brought ruin to the north. Do not think this victory makes you invincible, Your Grace. The north remembers, but so too does the south. But you will not live to see it.
Without another word, Robb lifts his sword and decapitates Roose. In the south, Olenna is true to her word and ensures the Lannisters' efforts are hampered, though this is helped by Cersei's incompetence. Her attempts to unseat Margaery as queen only cause Olenna to decide that maintaining the Iron Throne is more trouble than it's worth, and instead convinces the Tyrells to back Stannis. Coupled with the stain on the Lannisters' reputation from the Red Wedding, ensures that few respect them, and their failures allow even less to fear them. Without Tywin, the house soon sinks into obscurity. With the war over, Robb sends Arya down to marry Willis. Thankfully, this marriage proves to be happy, as Willis is happy to let Arya continue training as a swordsman. Eventually, he decides to bend the knee to Stannis, making the Seven Kingdoms whole once again. Jon Connington and young Griff gather over the map with the captains of the Golden Company to discuss their next move. Now that they've won over the sellswords, the next step should be simple. Go with young Griff's aunt in Meereen and combine their forces. But simple doesn't seem good enough for many of the captains. Some of them urge Jon to sail to Westeros without her. News soon arrives that Daenerys is under siege in her city by a host of slavers, sellswords, and even the vaunted lockstep legions of Jaskari. There is no guarantee she'll even survive this invasion. Running to her aid might only bog them down and drag them into a war that they have no contract with. Harry Strickland remains there, which means no promise of pay. Instead, some suggest sailing to Westeros without her and taking advantage of the chaos left over by the War of the Five Kings. They could land somewhere and launch a lightning campaign that could entrench themselves until such a time that Daenerys could join them. However, Jon Connington is not convinced.
If we wanted chaos, we should have begun our invasion a year ago. Back then, there were 5 kings instead of 1. But King Stannis and the Young Wolf have now joined forces. They brought the rebel Freys and Boltons to heel and secured that for them. Meanwhile, the Roses have married into this coalition. Together, they crushed the Lannisters and took the Iron Throne. No, if we strike now, King Stannis will be waiting for us. He'll have his pet wolf running by his side. I hear the Lannisters are not happy with him. Maybe Sir Kevin might be willing to come to terms and... The Lannisters, after their stunt with the Red Wedding, their name is poisoned, and working with them would only doom our cause. Besides, this is Stannis fucking Baratheon. While you were hammering out contracts, Harry, he was warring. He was barely young Griff's age when he was besieged at Storm's End, and yet he survived a year without relief. I already smashed the wildling army 20 times his size.
He also defeated the evil Lord Bolton. All of that and more. We'd be better off in Meereen, I say. Queen Daenerys has unsullied, sellswords, dragons. We'll need all of that if we're going to take the Seven Kingdoms. And all of those are under siege at Meereen. Not the first siege the Golden Company broke. If you want us to rush to our death on the shores of the Stormlands, be my guest. But I would accept payment with unsullied spears, sellswords, and dragonfire.
The other captains begin to nod in agreement. A vote is called, and the captains vote overwhelmingly to sail east to Meereen. The Golden Company marches east, their banners rippling in the wind. The golden skull on black, a stark contrast against the dusty Essos sky. Their column stretches for miles, disciplined soldiers in gleaming armor, their horses well-fed and restless. Griff rides at the head alongside John Connington as they meet up with a force of Lazars who come to Meereen's aid. The Lamb men are eager for backup and happy to let them take over. Harry Strickland sends messages ahead that declares their intent. The Golden Company has come to aid the people of Meereen against their oppressors. Meereen is on the brink of collapse. Within the city walls, Sir Barristan Selmy leads the Defenders, a mix of sellswords, freedmen, unsullied, and pit fighters. Their siege has been brutal on the Defenders, depriving them of supplies just as a plague spreads through the streets. Still, while Barristan cannot change that, he can change the battle, as Slaver's coalition has tightened its siege. Their trebuchets hammering the walls, Sir Barristan launches sortie after sortie with unsullied and pit fighters by his side. Together they prevent them from outright storming the walls and even kill a few of the secondary leaders. Despite his age, Sir Barristan still remains one of the best warriors on the field. His longsword moves like a blur, cutting through swaths of foes while his troops fight with equal ferocity, unwilling to give up their newfound freedom. The pit fighters rip through the slavers' ranks, their skill unmatched on and off the fighting pits, while Unsullied move with less flourish. However, their iron discipline prevents the slavers from ever flanking them. Thousands of Yunkish warriors fall, but the noose continues to tighten. They are outnumbered, outmatched, and the cries of the wounded grow louder each day. Each sortie leads to horrific casualties, and one attack nearly takes his life as several pit fighters turn against him. As he retreats to the walls, he receives the news. In his fatigue, he welcomes the sound of the Golden Company's horns. The sellswords arrive like a thunderstorm. They smash into the rear of the slavers' forces, their knights and elephants cutting a bloody swath through the enemy ranks. Archers find a position on the high ground, raining arrows down on the poorly armored slave soldiers. Sir Barristan retreats back to the walls, barely believing his eyes as the disciplined phalanxes of the Golden Company drive the enemy into chaos. Relief floods him. Finally, they have a chance. The slavers manage to rally their armies behind the lockstep legions, who form a defensive line and withdraw from the wall. They reform their defensive line along with some sellswords and other members of the coalition. However, the arrival of the Golden Company triggers a cascade of defections. The Windblown turn their cloaks and join the frays against their former allies. In particular, they launch an attack on their hated enemy, the Company of the Cat, and rout their forces. The Second Sons, tempted by gold and Tyrion's honeyed words, follow suit, scattering a group of slavers and capturing their leaders. By the end of the day, a path has been opened for the Golden Company and their fair-weathered allies to enter the city as the besiegers move to lick their wounds. The people are greeted with cheers and adulation from the crowds who, while weakened from weeks of siege, rush out to welcome them. Young Griff rides at the front of the column with his captains proclaiming himself Aegon VI, nephew of Daenerys. This drives the people mad with excitement as they hear of this long-lost prince who had come to their hour of need. But Sir Barristan is not pleased with this development, and has Aegon brought to Daenerys' pyramid. Although they hear their story, he remains skeptical. Still, he cannot send them off after seeing their success and how excited the city is. Aegon's presence alone is enough to lift morale. To Jon's surprise, he finds Tyrion among the Second Sons, while Barristan finds Jorah Mormont. The latter is taken for questioning. Tyrion sees the celebration in the city and sees an opportunity. He sees no sign of Daenerys and realizes this is their chance to capture the city's heart. If she is alive and returns, she will find a city in their debt, not hers, which can make bargaining much easier. He urges Jon to take Aegon around the city, parading him and making him seem like a hero to win the people's love. This will ensure the city falls into their hands, and Daenerys will be forced to accept whatever terms they offer. For the next few days, as they organize their counterattack, Aegon travels through the city, dining with nobles, visiting soldiers in the barracks, and comforting the people in the hospital or the streets. There he listens to their stories and struggles, eats some of the same food as them, and understands their plight. When the time comes to attack, they hear of another force on the horizon, the Iron Fleet. Nearly 50 heavy longships smash through the hapless Yunkai fleet. Led by the Iron Victory, they cut through the bay as they bombard the slavers' ships and deliver fresh reinforcements to the city. The siege begins to crumble from all sides. Under Connington's and Barristan's command, the Allied forces launch a coordinated assault. The slavers' coalition shatters under the combined might of the Golden Company, defected sellswords, and Ironborn. The armies of Karth, the Dothraki Khalasars, and the remnants of the slavers' armies are crushed, their leaders falling one by one or retreating. By the end of the battle, the coalition is broken, and its power is shattered beyond repair, and they soon beg for terms. Prisoners are rounded up and paraded through the city, while the stores of the coalition are raided to feed the city that has starved for so many days. Where there was despair weeks ago, there is now a celebration. A lavish feast is thrown, while games are held in the fighting pits, where there is no shortage of volunteers, including Ironborn, knights, and sellswords, joining the pit fighters, though Sir Barristan ensures these games are only to first blood. Even the old knight cannot help but feel giddy at this victory. However, he knows he cannot dawdle, as they have an opportunity to win the war. As Daenerys is not there, he reluctantly allows Aegon to handle the negotiations, as his supposed blood ties to Daenerys are now well known. Under Barristan's supervision, they hammer out the terms. The slave masters are to be pardoned, though their slaves are to be released immediately, and they must forever renounce the practice. Meanwhile, garrisons of Unsullied will be sent to Astapor and Yunkai, while New Gis will not interfere with the affairs of Slaver's Bay any longer. But a few days later, Daenerys appears astride Drogon. The shadow of the great black dragon stretches across the city as nearly 20,000 Dothraki riders flood in behind her. The cheers of the Meerenice mix with the uneasy murmurs of the Golden Company and their allies, all unsure of how the Dragon Queen will react to their presence. Drogon lands with a thunderous impact before the city gates, and Sir Barristan Selmy steps forward to greet her.
Your Grace, Meereen is saved, but there are new allies you must meet.
Daenerys dismounts gracefully, her expression a mix of relief and suspicion as her eyes sweep over the assembled figures awaiting her. Tyrion Lannister bows with a smirk. Aegon Targaryen, flanked by Jon Connington and the Dornishmen Archibald Yornwood and Garrus Drinkwater, from whom she remembers. Victorian Greyjoy, towering and grim, looms with his axe in hand. And then there is Jorah Mormont, kneeling almost immediately, his face lined with desperation.
Your Grace, I swayed the Second Sons back to your cause. I fought for you every step of the way.
But Daenerys cuts him off, her tone sharp.
It was the Golden Company who turned the tide, Sir Jorah. I know what happened here.
Jorah's shoulders slump, and for a moment he looks utterly defeated. Then he bows his head, falling fully to his knees.
I beg your forgiveness. I betrayed you once. But I've never stopped trying to make it right. If I cannot make amends, then at least let me die in your service.
You've made mistakes, Jorah, but I see your loyalty, even if I came too late. Rise, and don't make me regret this.
Your Grace, I've come to offer my service. I know you may question my motives, but believe me, I understand betrayal and suffering more than most.
You grew up in a castle of wealth and privilege. What suffering could you possibly know?
Wealth, yes, but not love. My father despised me for my deformity. He tried to have me executed for a crime I did not commit. More than once he tried to have me killed along with my sister and nephew. If you want proof of my family's monstrous name, I can write you a book on it. If you want them dead, well, I've killed 2 of them already. Tyrion Lannister has earned his place. His mind is sharper than any sword, and his loyalty, once given, is unshakable. When I was being bartered off at the slave market, he could have left me for dead, and yet Tyrion Lannister vouched for me. Let me vouch for him now.
Very well. He can stay. For now.
The tension escalates when Aegon Targaryen, Victorian Greyjoy, and the Dornishmen press their claims.
You need the Golden Company, and they follow me. Together, we can unite House Targaryen and secure the Iron Throne as man and wife.
My friend, Quentyn made similar claims before. He promised you Dorne, and you rejected him. We won't do so again unless you make amends, Your Grace.
Whatever they offered you is useless without ships. Marry me, and the Iron Fleet is yours.
Daenerys' eyes flash with anger, and she strides forward.
I am no man's prize. Dracarys.
Drogon unleashes a fiery roar into the sky, the flames illuminating the night and silencing the suitors who all step back in surprise.
You will not dictate terms to me.
Then perhaps I'll cut down the others and claim you myself.
We are far from the sea, Iron Man. We'll see how well you fare against me.
No one threatens my king in my presence.
Before the situation can spiral into violence, Tyrion steps between them, raising his hands.
Enough! If we fight each other now, we'll hand Slavers Bay back to the slavers. Is that what you fools want? To bleed ourselves dry before we even see the Seven Kingdoms? Stannis commands a united realm, and if we cannot provide a similar force, then we have already lost.
Reluctantly, the others step back, though the tension remains palpable. Daenerys' gaze sweeps over them, her voice steady and commanding.
Do not forget who the true queen is. I will welcome your judgment and be glad to hear your counsel. Make no mistake, if I choose to marry, we shall be equals. But if you wish to follow me, you will do so on my terms. Otherwise, leave now.
The room falls silent, and for a moment, no one speaks. Finally, Jon inclines his head.
As you command, Your Grace.
The others follow suit, though their faces reveal mixed emotions, ambition, frustration, and grudging respect. For now at least, Daenerys has managed to unite them, but she knows the alliances forged here are as fragile as glass. Soon after, they set sail for Westeros, commanding an army unlike any seen in centuries. Her forces are divided into 3 prongs of invasion, each carefully orchestrated to maximize chaos and exploit the fractured state of the realm. The first invasion targets the Vale, which Tyrion advises has remained isolated and untouched by the wars ravaging the Seven Kingdoms. But they are also isolated politically as Littlefinger continues his schemes. This attack is led by Aegon Targaryen, flanked by Jon Connington and the Golden Company, along with the Windblown, who land along the Fingers in a lightning campaign. The isolated region is helpless to the attack, and they quickly secure a landing zone. Saemon Templeton and the other lords gather their armies to face them. Their cavalry is some of the best in the world and rush to meet them. It crashes into the phalanx of sellswords, trying to keep them back. But against the disciplined ranks of the Vale, even these sellswords cannot hold against them. But just as victory seems certain, Jon Connington deploys his elephants. Unused to their smell and appearance, the horses panic at the smell of them and scatter the disciplined charge that was meant to break their lines. The elephants sweep forward, running through their infantry, which scatters before them. The Vale Lords, unprepared for such ferocity, fall one by one as the invaders rampage through the fertile lands. Jon Royce tries to make a final stand, but the reinforcements promised by Lyn Corbray do not arrive, leaving him to face the Golden Company alone. He soon retreats in disarray. Littlefinger sees an opportunity as after the Golden Company weakens his enemy, he secretly meets with the invaders. He offers his trump card, Sansa Stark, who could be used to manipulate the Northern Lords. Meanwhile, he even promises the allegiance of remaining Vale Lords. It is easy enough to manipulate Robert Arryn to make this pronouncement after giving him a ride on an elephant. With Littlefinger scheming to align with Aegon's campaign, their forces march south towards King's Landing, gaining momentum with each victory as the Vale Lords reluctantly march with him. Garrus Drinkwater and Archibald Yarnwood are dispatched to Dorne to convince Prince Doran Martell to support Daenerys. Their diplomatic efforts focus on promises of vengeance for Elia Martell, and a new dawn for House Martell in a united Targaryen-led Westeros. To provide sincerity, they bring with them the bones of Quentyn Martell. Victarion Greyjoy lures his brother out by promising that he has brought out the dragon as promised. Euron gathers his forces and the shields to meet with him. The confrontation ends disastrously for Euron, as the dragon rains fire upon his fleet, leaving nothing but charred ships and scorched sea. Euron gets to see the dragon as he wishes, as he goes up in flames. With the Reach's defenses weakened, he garrisons the holdings of Euron. He leaves a substantial portion of the fleet to continue harassing the Reach, keeping their forces occupied as the rest of Victarion's forces shift their focus to the Westerlands, striking at the Lannisters' lands already despised and vulnerable after years of war. Kevan Lannister tries desperately to rally the defenses. While this unfolds, Ser Barristan Selmy and Daario Naharis lead the Dothraki and the remaining sellswords to land near Fair Island, where they pillage across the Westerlands. They storm villages and castles while Kevan tries to deal with them. He attempts a scorched earth policy, burning whatever they cannot carry as they advance east to meet up with Aegon's forces, aiming to split the realm in two. Once the Iron Fleet deploys the land forces, Victarion strikes at the undermanned Iron Islands. With Euron dead, most houses are quick to pledge allegiance to him and reinforce his armies for the third and most daring invasion. Daenerys herself leads the dragons alongside Victarion Greyjoy and Jorah Mormont to the north, Stannis' best commander. Victarion's Ironborn raid the northern coastline while Daenerys attempts to force Robb Stark to bend the knee. Jorah leads a small force to Bear Island and captures it, using it as a springboard. The western coast, already vulnerable from the previous war, quickly falls beneath the Unsullied and Ironborn raiders, along with a host of freedmen. They capture the coastal houses and begin advancing inland. However, Robb proves to be a cunning and pragmatic commander. Avoiding confrontation, he employs the unforgiving northern winter to his advantage. He has his cavalry, led by Mage Mormont, to raid their forces with the northern cavalry. Meanwhile, the Hornwoods and Glovers attack from the Wolfswood, and mountain clans attack from the hills. These slowly weaken his forces. But these small bands are not immune to dragonfire. Wherever they can, Daenerys burns through entire raiding parties of northern warriors. The casualties of the north slowly mount as they push deeper. Meanwhile, giants and wildlings join the attack in the ambushes, harrying the invaders and trying to take down the dragons. Their mammoths terrify the invaders, though the Unsullied manage to break, frightening them off with barrages of javelin. The massive arrows used by the giants can penetrate the dragon's skin and warn them to take heed. Robb's strategy begins to pay off, as supply lines falter and morale weakens among Victarion's forces. Stannis, meanwhile, takes up the banner of resistance in the south. As Aegon advances into the Riverlands and pours into the area, the Knights of the Vale easily smash through the weakened resistance of the River Lords, forcing them to fight a guerrilla war. Stannis gathers his forces, bolstered by contingents of wildlings and giants who now fight under his command. In a stunning series of skirmishes, Stannis defeats several Vale Lords as he tries to block their advance and prevent them from linking with their host west. He defeats several isolated pockets before rushing to Fairmarket, where he meets them. The battle around this town is bloody, as is the host of Stormlands, Crownlanders, and Rivermen, as they clash with the Vale Knights along with the Sellswords. The Golden Company's discipline holds, and they manage to force a crossing on the left flank, smashing the Stormlanders present. This allows them to bring their elephants to bear. Meanwhile, the Crownlanders break from a charge of Valemen on the left. It seems like the town might be surrounded, but that is where Stannis unveils his surprise. Giants emerge, hidden in the barns of the town as they come rushing out and crashing into the cavalry. For once, their vaunted cavalry finds something they cannot break. Meanwhile, as the elephant and sellswords try to outflank them, Stannis unleashes his mammoths. The great beasts clash with their cousins in the brutal display of tusks and fur. Each clash sends the ground shaking and crushes those unfortunate enough to get out of their way. Eventually, the Golden Company orders a retreat, giving Stannis control of the western Riverlands. In the Reach, Randall Tarley's disciplined forces march north to the Westerlands, at last providing aid to the beleaguered Westerlands. They resist the Dothraki with surprising effectiveness, refusing to break formation despite the overwhelming ferocity of the horsemen, or their feigned retreat. Yet even Tarly's discipline is tested as the Dothraki, emboldened by their early successes, begin to press harder. After throwing their charges in arrow storms, they follow with an unsullied phalanx. This unbreakable line hits hard, putting immense pressure on the Reachmen and bringing their advance to a grinding halt. Daario and Ser Barristan both lead daring charges that cut the Reach host, while the Second Sons delay Kevan Lannister's advance, keeping those two hosts from joining up. Ser Barristan engages Randyll Tarly directly in a duel that rivals Robert and Rhaegar's fight. All around them, their soldiers fight, sensing blood, but neither one gives any ground or takes their eye off the other. Even with Heartsbane in hand, Ser Barristan remains as graceful as ever, never making a mistake or losing focus until he spots an opening. Randyll wounds the Great Knight, slipping his sword under Barristan's armor and scoring a cut across his shoulder. But as he moves in for the kill, Barristan the Bold slides forward and slips his sword between Randyll's gorget and helmet and slices him across the neck. Seeing this, the Reachmen retreat, with the Dothraki pursuing them at every step, never stopping until they reach the border between the Reach and Westerlands, where a Dornish host is waiting for them, led by Lord Yornwood. At first, the Dothraki cheer their arrival and believe these are the promised reinforcements. But with Tywin and the Mountain dead, Doran has little reason to support Daenerys, especially when it costs him a son. The Dornish suddenly turn on their once allies, archers raising their bows and unleashing a volley on the Dothraki, who scatter in surprise. The Dornish knights strike at their scattered formations, picking them off as Kevan helps rout them. In the north, Daenerys chases a group of wildling raiders to the Gift, where she unleashes fire upon their hideouts and shelters. But in this battle, Robb rallies his forces, including several giants who rush to their aid. Viserion suddenly pulls up mid-flight, screeching unnaturally as his wings falter. He hovers erratically, flames spilling from his mouth in uncontrolled bursts, igniting both wildlings and freedmen forces indiscriminately. His golden eyes glaze over as if caught in a trance. He veers wildly, crashing against the wall with a thunderous impact that sends chunks of ice cascading to the ground. Daenerys tries to control him with commands, while the fighting halts abruptly as both sides look up in horror. Drogon and Rhaegal circle above as they are uneasy. From the gorge, a bone-chilling sound rises, a deep, guttural howl. Shadows begin to emerge from the icy depths, shambling forms with glowing blue eyes. The whites pour out like a flood, their skeletal bodies moving with terrifying purpose. Hundreds of them, led by an undead weeper, his face twisted into a grotesque grin of frozen death. Beside him, another figure holds back, Varmir Sixskins, his hands stretched out toward Viserion, his face twisted in concentration as he tries to force his way into the dragon's mind. Viserion thrashes violently, his tail sweeping through the snow. His roars mingled with eerie cries of the undead. Drogon and Rhaegal dive into the fray, their flames cutting swaths through the whites. Drogon's fiery breath engulfs the Weeper, reducing the undead wildling into ash in seconds, while Rhaegal snaps his jaw around a charging white bear, crushing it with a sickening crunch. Varmir screams, his body convulsing as he struggles to maintain control of Viserion. But Drogon swoops low, his massive talons ripping through Varmir's torso, flinging his body aside like a ragdoll. The bond snaps and Viserion collapses to the ground, breathing heavily as he shakes off the influence. For a moment, the battlefield is still. Both sides stare at the carnage, the frozen ground littered with charred corpses, human, white, and beast alike. Daenerys, astride Drogon, lands amidst the wreckage, her face pale as she surveys the aftermath. She turns to Tormund Giantsbane, the wildling commander.
What was that?
That was the White Walkers. And if they are here, we've got bigger problems than your war, Dragon Queen.
Even days after her encounter with the dead, the cold continues to bite sharply at Daenerys. She tries to force it aside as she enters the great hall of the twins, feeling all eyes watching her. Lord Oliver Frey has graciously given up his seat for Robb, alongside him King Stannis and their other allies. Daenerys, accompanied by Tyrion, Victarion, and Grey Worm, while Jon Connington and Aegon VI sit together with men from the Vale and Dorne.
What happened?
I saw them. The dead. Why didn't you tell me about them?
You wouldn't have believed us if we told you. But now that you have, what precautions are we taking?
I've already tasked Jon with destroying the Bridge of Skulls. The wall is being fortified as we speak, and so far there have not been any further incursions. What are you talking about?
Before we answer, I would like the full story of what happened in the south.
Nodding, her commanders and the enemy lords recount the events to her. After Victarion and the Golden Company arrived and helped break the siege of Meereen, they began their invasion of Westeros. Jon Connington and Aegon II landed in the Vale, allying with Littlefinger and invading the Riverlands where they were halted by Stannis. Meanwhile, Victarion crushed Euron's forces and landed the Dothraki and freedmen in the Reach and Westerlands, led by Ser Barristan Selmy. However, the Dornishmen did not rise for Daenerys as expected. Instead, it seems they chose Aegon VI instead. Lastly, Daenerys took her forces north with Victarion and tried to defeat Robb Stark. But as they battled beneath the wall, they were attacked by whites, including the skin changer Varamar Sixskins, who briefly took control of Viserion and struck at the wall. Although Varamar was defeated, it left Viserion weak.
This threat, what I saw beyond was unlike anything I've ever encountered. We cannot leave the White Walkers to roam free.
On that we agree. So, does that mean you were prepared to work with me to stop them?
Yes. For the sake of the realm, my forces will join with yours.
You act as if the White Walkers are already upon us. But you said it yourself. The wall still stands, and if the Bridge of Skulls is gone, I say we settle the question of kingship first, so that when we march north, it shall be under one banner.
Are you blind, young one? Those things nearly got through on their first chance. What will stop them from trying again? Me. I've been blessed with a drowned god and the Lord of Light. You do not need an army. I shall crush these White Walkers in the name of R'hllor. I've heard claims like that before. Thinking isn't your strong suit, so stupid. Sit down before you hurt yourself.
Victarion snarls and Stannis reaches for his sword, warning that he has R'hllor's blessing too. Meanwhile, the Dornishmen shout that they will not serve the woman who killed their prince. Other houses shout in agreement. Westermen, Valemen, and Reachmen, who suffered the brunt of Daenerys' invasion, denounce her as well and urge Stannis to arrest them all.
Enough! My house's name was nearly sullied by spilling the blood of guests. I will not do so again. No man nor woman shall be harmed here. Then hear my terms. If these White Walkers are truly a threat, accept my hand and get my Golden Company and my followers. If you truly value the Seven Kingdoms, it should be an easy choice.
How dare you? Our realm bleeds and you seek profit from it. Propose that again and I will have Drogon burn you where you stand. If you will not march, then I shall do the king's work for him. The north shall have my own Sullied, freedmen, and Dothraki.
Aye, and my Ironborn. I shall gather my forces as well.
As they depart, Jon Connington joins his young ward outside the twins. He senses an opportunity. Most of the lords looked unhappy with the prospect of marching with Daenerys' army. It seems Stannis' rule might be weakening. This offers a chance for them to find allies. The Westerosi lords, already furious at Daenerys' campaigns, grumble openly at the prospect of fighting alongside her marauding forces. Jon and Littlefinger begin working to exploit this weakness. They approach these lords and remind them that though Aegon took part in the invasion, his Golden Company largely maintained discipline, while Daenerys' barbarians and slaves burned and pillaged the countryside. The Dornish need no encouragement and join in this effort. They claim that under Aegon, he can send away Daenerys' army and control her. Slowly, several houses across the west defect to Aegon's army. Their priority, though, is to undermine Stannis. As he begins assembling his grand army, calling upon contingents from all across the Seven Kingdoms, he receives pushback from them. Many lords make excuses, while others refuse to answer, and some are actively hostile, raiding the territory of those who do not answer the call. As Stannis' army assembles, he is now faced with a difficult prospect. The north is distant and poor, making it difficult to resupply once he crosses the neck unless his rear is secure. This forces him to deal with these lords one by one to try and restore order, though it also prevents him from joining Robb's forces. Meanwhile, Littlefinger urges Jon Connington to join forces with the Freys and turn them over as it is a natural choke point. If they succeed, they can prevent Stannis from marching north, leaving Daenerys and Robb to face the threat on their own. If they fail, then Jon and Aegon are in the best position to halt their advance. At the Wall, Jon Snow oversees the destruction of the Bridge of Skulls and fortifies every castle along the wall. He gathers every able-bodied man the Night's Watch can muster, along with a contingent of northern and wildling troops sent by Robb, their faces pale with terror as they see the sight below. Below the wall, they see a mass of darkness directly below them. It initially seems like the haunted forest is overgrown, but in reality, that mass is thousands upon thousands of wights. For the moment, they cannot cross, but it is only a matter of time before they try again. In the meantime, they are to weaken their forces as much as they can. Archers rain down fire arrows, while rangers pour oil and tar to make them more flammable. The freedmen, Unsullied, and Dothraki ride alongside these reinforcements and join in the efforts. They launch regular sorties in places where the Whites' ranks seem thinner to cull their numbers. However, while they cannot cross the wall, they try to scale it going around, or even repairing the Bridge of Skulls. All these efforts are halted by the North. Victarion soon joins them, being stationed in the Shadow Tower as he watches the battle unfold. His job is to watch the sea and prevent anyone from swimming across, and to protect Viserion, who is still recovering from the warging. However, the real action is on the other coast, where reports from Hardhome claim the dead are stealing marooned Night Watch ships. But as he looks on, he sees Rhaegal and Drogon ahead, patrolling the wall. Victarion bites his lip, longing to join them. His frustration is further fueled by the disdain the other lordlings have for him. While Daenerys trusts him well enough for this task, he can tell she does not take his boasts seriously. The others are even less subtle in looking down on him. Most regard him as more than a simpleton, trying to confuse him with their mockery. Others simply see him as a savage, looking at him with barely concealed disdain for his actions in the war. To them, his claims of being Azor Ahai are just boasts at best, or ravings of a madman at worst. For the first time, he begins to understand how his nephew Theon feels. But no man will be calling him a fool once he flies. Victarion stands atop his ship, gripping the Dragonbinder horn. The Ironborn looks on him with awe as he raises the horn to his lips and blows. The sound is overwhelming, a deep, resonant wail that shakes the ice and echoes across the frozen seas. The Ironborn tense, watching as Victarion lurches. They expect him to fall over dead, but just when it seems like he's about to fall, he instead throws his head back and unleashes a roar. Viserion, the white-scaled dragon, roars in pain and fury. He stirs himself from his slumber, roaring and blowing bursts of flame into the air. He tries shaking his head to fight the sudden surge of magic. Victarion locks eyes with the great dragon, and the two remain in a battle of wills until at last, Viserion submits to Victarion's will. He bows his head and allows Victarion to ride him. Once secure on his back, the dragon looks up into the sky and springs into the air. His wings spread out, and he suddenly soars through the sky, circling his small fleet as his warriors all cheer him on. He circles them 3 times before flying eastward towards Eastwatch by the sea. With the dragon under his command, Victarion Greyjoy flies to Eastwatch by the sea, the salty wind tearing at his face and the Dragonbinder horn still ringing in his ears. Viserion roars above the icy waves, its wings stirring up whirlpools in the frigid sea below. The dragon is his, and with it, he will carve his name into history. Ahead, the fleet of ships carrying the dead from Hardhome comes into view. Their hulls, blackened with frost and rot, seem to glide unnaturally over the water. The decks are filled with wights, the silhouettes of monstrous ice spiders and towering white giants. The sight is enough to chill even the fiercest Ironborn's blood, but Victarion feels only triumph. He raises his axe high, signaling Viserion to attack. The dragon descends like a storm. A torrent of flames erupt from its maw, washing over the fleet. The wooden ships ignite instantly, exploding into shards and sending wights screeching into the icy waters below. The Ironborn roar in triumph as the unnatural flames devour the enemy.
I am Victarion Greyjoy, Azor Ahai reborn, and today the living and the dead shall fear me.
He already imagines himself returning to Daenerys triumphant. This will surely make him the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. But the air changes as he approaches the largest ship. A terrible cold sweeps across Victarion, chilling him to the bone. From its flaming deck, the Night King emerges, his pale blue eyes fixed on Victarion. With an intensity that pierces even the Iron Captain's confidence, Victarion urges Viserion to circle and finish him off. The dragon hesitates, its wings faltering mid-beat. It roars weakly, but no flames come. The Night King raises his hand, his pale fingers outstretched, and a deep, resonant hum fills the air. Viserion trembles, his mighty form swaying as his mind struggles between two masters. It thrashes in the air, flailing and nearly throwing Victarion off.
No, obey me!
Victarion bellows, striking at the dragon's neck with the flat of his axe, as if to jar it free from the Night King's grip. Despite that, Victarion refuses to retreat. He leaps from his dragon's back and lands on the deck of the burning ship. Before charging, the Night King watches, impassive. The ancient foe moves with inhuman speed. A blade of ice, sharp as a winter gale, materializes in the Night King's hand. With one fluid motion, he steps aside and strikes. He manages to slam the butt of his axe against the Night King's chest again and again, though it hardly moves him. Then, with inhuman speed, his icy blade pierces through Victarion's chest. For a moment, he feels nothing but the cold, deeper and more absolute than he has ever known. His axe falls from his hands. The Night King's lifeless gaze meets him as the Iron Captain grimaces. He pauses long enough to pull the dragon binder from his side before kicking him off the ship. The last thing he sees is the drowned god's watery hulls. Viserion lets out a mournful cry, the sound echoing across the frozen seas as the dragon's wings fail. His body tilts, crashing into the icy water below with a thunderous splash. In the storm-lashed south, Stannis Baratheon tightens his grip on the fractured remnants of the Seven Kingdoms. His forces, wary from battle, follow the one true king as they march through the Reach, the Riverlands, and beyond. Most of these rebellions are small, but they are like flies, and each time one is crushed, another pops up. His retribution is harsh, but fair, dealing with any rebel lords with swift justice, either by beheading or for particularly troublesome or cruel lords being hanged over the pyres. While this puts fear in their hearts, Davos helps with their love, speaking to the small folk and promising to help rebuild however they can. While grumbling about delays, Stannis does not stop him and lets his hand work. The Westerlands are brought into the fold, knowing that they are already on thin ice. The Reach, though bloodied, falls under Stannis' banner, but the Riverlands remain divided, with houses teetering between loyalty and treachery. At the Twins, Jon Connington sees the chaos as an opportunity. He leads a strike team of men loyal to Aegon VI to the Twins and captures it. He uses the choke point to demand terms from both Stannis and Robb Stark. With the North cut, Connington believes he holds all the cards. His terms are bold: recognition of Aegon VI as the true king. But his efforts to win over the Freys are less successful. He promises them gold, a marriage alliance between them and the king, and new territories. While this might have worked for old Walder Frey, Lord Oliver Frey holds to his loyalty to Robb Stark. While he feigns loyalty, he secretly plots to have this garrison removed. On a stormy night, Oliver makes his move. He gathers the loyal remnants of the Frey forces, invites them to a feast in their honor, and says he will consent to their agreement. Just as his grandfather before him, he organizes a strike. But instead of guests and friends, Oliver targets these invaders. Once he gets them nice and drunk, his men strike. Frey knights and men-at-arms burst in and begin slaughtering the guests as they eat and drink. Jon Connington jumps to his feet, but he is quickly mobbed by these men and dragged before Oliver. The young lord stands tall as he declares the twins will not break faith with Robb Stark or King Stannis. Connington's protests fall on deaf ears, and his guards are stripped of their weapons. The Golden Company, deprived of their commander, is left leaderless. Word of the coup reaches Stannis at Riverrun by Raven. He studies the letter in the flickering light of his tent and rides hard to the twins with a small force. There, the first thing he does is thank Oliver for his loyal service, but then gathers the prisoners taken, where he offers simple terms. Bend the knee to his command and join the fight against the dead, or face the fate of traitors. While Jon Connington remains defiant, most sellswords gladly bend the knee. For the first time in centuries, the storied sellsword company bends to a king's will. Stannis can see the defiance in Connington's eyes and glares at him.
You seek to put that brat of yours on my throne. He will never see it, especially if we allow the White Walkers to march. You were correct about one thing. We must only march under one banner. My banner. If you cannot accept that, I will take your head now. But if you and Aegon march with me, I might be convinced to let you live, to plot another day.
Jon stares at the king, then takes a deep breath, slowly dropping to one knee. Stannis wastes no time integrating their disciplined ranks into his forces. The combined armies swell in size and strength. Littlefinger is executed for this, and the Vale gladly rejoins Stannis, while Dorne is now beaten into submission, seeing their allies vanish. With the twins clear, they begin their march up the neck. On the wall, a storm of activity is happening as they can hear an otherworldly roar from beyond the wall. Archers and soldiers rush to the top, preparing to deal with another attack. Crossbows and ballistas aim at the shape that swoops through the treetops. It's too fast for any of them to hit, even as it sails upward and flies higher than the wall. Around it, a miniature storm forms, carrying bitter winds and thunderclaps. But this is no natural storm. It heralds his arrival. The Night King, and a creature far worse than even the whispers of terror predicted. It is an ice dragon, impossibly vast, its translucent wings shimmering with frost as it beats against the air. Bound by Dragonbinder, it dives towards the wall. Its breath is a torrent of death, a piercing blast of ice and frost that slams into the ancient structure. The wall groans in protest, and men stumble about, some tumbling over the edge. The magic that has held it together for millennia falters under the relentless onslaught. The ice dragon circles again, unleashing another devastating blast. Massive chunks of ice crash to the ground, sending shock waves through the north. With one final roar, the ice dragon drives its icy breath into the wall's base, and the mighty structure collapses, leaving the way open. The dead rush forward like an unstoppable tide. Thousands upon thousands of wights spill through the breach, their jagged weapons glinting in the pale light. Among them march monstrous giants and half-rotted bears. Jon Snow and his army desperately try to hold the line. The Dothraki circle the breaches, pouring fire into the dead, while the Unsullied form a line and try to throw them back. They push and drive their spear points at the wights, while Northmen fire flaming arrows or hack at them. They fight like demons, desperate to stop them there as ravens are sent out with one order across the north. Run. They battle through the night, but the tide of the dead is endless, and soon more gaps appear in the wall. Jon yells for his men to retreat. They fall back in ragged groups, the Dothraki and cavalry covering their retreat. Jon looks back and sees the ice dragon land among the dead, its massive claws crushing the frozen earth. The Night King dismounts, his cold gaze following the living as they flee. For a moment, Jon locks eyes with them, and an icy dread fills his heart. They are joined on the road by a sea of refugees who heed Jon's warning. They are all fleeing south to the Neck, or White Harbor. The undead are relentless, and they are nearly overwhelmed before reaching the Winterfell. It is only thanks to Daenerys and her dragons arriving and scattering the wights that they can escape. Refugees flood into the ancient castle, their faces pale with fear. Meanwhile, Robb gathers his men, and Daenerys circles above atop Drogon. Jon moves among the soldiers, offering words of encouragement and readying them for the battle to come. The dead arrive in an endless wave, their numbers bolstered by the fallen from the wall and every village they pass on their march. The defenders fight valiantly, arrows and dragon glass cutting through the horde, but every wight that falls, 2 more rise to take its place. Entire units of men fight and die to hold the castle, whether they be Northmen on the wall, unsullied launching desperate sorties, or freedmen guarding choke points. For a few days, they manage to hold until they hear a roar from above. The ice dragon swoops down, its icy breath freezing the castle's outer walls and shattering defenses. Daenerys mounts Drogon and takes to the skies alongside Rhaegal. Flames erupt from his jaws and burn through the dead before facing off against the ice dragon. They collide midair, their roars splitting the sky and shaking the heavens. The ice dragon's breath coats the air with frost, sending ice raining down on the castle. Drogon and Rhaegal seem immune to it as they fly forward. It rakes its claws against Drogon, while Rhaegal's massive bulk crashes into the ice dragon. The 2 beasts spiral through the storm. Drogon drops after them, striking where he can, while Rhaegal manages to slash his claws against the dragon. They claw and tear through the frozen flesh, ripping away chunks of icy scales and exposing jagged shards of its unnatural form. Drogon rears back, his wings beating furiously as he unleashes a torrent of fire directly across the icy dragon's face. The flames roar, melting through the frost and snow, and the ice dragon lets out a piercing scream that echoes across the battlefield. Its massive head snaps back, its pale blue eyes now searing with fury, as molten frost drips from its face. Wounded and blinded in one eye, the ice dragon veers off into the whirlwind. For a moment, there is quiet as they search for it, but as they spot it hovering above, Rhaegal surges forward in pursuit. Daenerys watches from Drogon's back, her heart pounding as Rhaegal closes the distance. But the ice dragon twists midair, its frosted wings slicing through the wind and releasing a blast of icy breath directly at Rhaegal. The frost strikes him mid-flight, coating his wings in a crystalline layer of ice. His movements falter, his once powerful strokes turning sluggish as the cold overtakes him. Before he can recover, the ice dragon lashes out, its claws raking deep into Rhaegal's side. Blood spills across the sky, bright against the storm's gray. The green dragon lets out a deafening roar of pain as his body begins to fall, plummeting toward the battlefield below. The ground quakes with his impact, sending waves of snow and debris into the air. He lies still. Daenerys watches in horror, her scream piercing through the storm. Fury and grief consume her. She leans forward on Drogon. The dragon responds with a roar of defiance, his massive wings carrying them back toward the ice dragon. His flames burn hotter than ever, ignited by Daenerys' grief and fury. When he closes the distance, Drogon avoids the first swipe and flies in close, unleashing another bout of fire. His claws wrap around the ice dragon and he flaps his wings, angling him toward the ground, where he tumbles with a deafening crash, crushing the nearest wights. Before the ice dragon can recover, Drogon plants his claws against its neck and unleashes another burst of fire directly at him. This time, he does not stop until it's gone completely. However, when they search for the Night King, he retreats behind his wights, who all rush forward, forcing Drogon to fly up before they are overwhelmed. The defenders are driven back, the dead surging into Winterfell's inner walls. Chaos reigns as soldiers and refugees alike scramble to escape. But then there's a sound in the distance. Stannis' army arrives like a thunderstorm, their banners snapping in the wind. The Golden Company and men all across Westeros charge into the fray. Their combined might slam into the undead horde. Elephants trample through the wights, clearing a path for all men-at-arms to deal with the stragglers. They perform a phalanx and begin to push back as cavalry rush forward. At the front of this charge is Stannis, Lightbringer blazing brightly as he cuts through the undead towards the ruined gates. Behind him, Aegon VI rides closely behind, as they see the courtyard of Winterfell is close by. While most of the fighting has spread out, a handful of figures remain in combat with the Night King. Robb Stark and Jon Snow attack him 2-on-1, as Longclaw flashes, nearly taking his head off. But the Night King moves like a creature from a nightmare, avoiding each attack and parrying their strikes with almost lazy grace. Seeing this, Stannis and Aegon VI rush forward with Lightbringer and Blackfire. Their movements cut through the darkness around them. Together they press the attack. Daenerys, atop Drogon, picks up a dragonglass spear and thrusts it out at him. The blade strikes him across the stomach just as Robb drives his longsword into his side. Aegon and Stannis both drive their blades into his heart, while Jon beheads him. The Night King shatters, his icy form collapsing into a storm of shards. The undead horde collapse around them, lifeless once more. The living stand amidst the ruins, their victory hard won, but bittersweet. But what matters is the war is over. Seeing the devastation her war nearly brought, Daenerys opts to make peace with Stannis, deciding instead to return to Essos to rule her domains there. Aegon, for his part, is pardoned but no longer welcome in the Seven Kingdoms. Stannis advises him to set sail as well, telling him he may carve out a kingdom in the Stepstones or the Dispute Lands, even letting him settle beyond the Wall if he wishes, but that he can no longer stay here. With the war done, the task of rebuilding falls onto Stannis, but his success in the war finally unites the realm under him, allowing peace to descend upon the Seven Kingdoms. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.